Our speaker today is Dr. Pamirs Transboundary.
There's no laser.
He's the regional director of the WCS Asia program, supervising country programs and projects in temperate Asia for Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran, across Mongolia and Russia, and into Arctic Beringia. He is also the director of the WCS Training and Capacity Building Program and manages the WCS Graduate Scholarship Program and Research Fellowship Program. Peter Zahler is also the coordinator for the WCS Snow Leopard Program and serves as the secretariat for the WCS Science Council. He has over 30 years of experience in conservation biology and has performed research and programs in locations such as Alaska, Kazakhstan, Peru, and Venezuela. He designed, opened, and ran the WCS Pakistan program, the WCS Mongolia program, and the WCS Afghanistan program. He's also on the IUCN SSC Cabernet Specialist Group and is an area representative for the IUCN Asiatic Black Bear Expert Group for Afghanistan and Pakistan. In addition, he has performed and supervised research on a wide variety of mammals and birds. Today, Peter Zahler will be speaking on wildlife conservation across temperate Asia. So let's welcome our speaker.
Thank you all very much for coming. Appreciate the introduction. Very quickly, which one? Okay. Maybe I'll stand over this. Okay. So I don't know how many of you know all that much about the wildlife conservation societies that have worked for us, been working for us, but a number of you may not know all that much. So I thought I'd give you a very quick overview of our organization itself. Our mission statement is WCS Saves Wildlife in Wild Places. That was our original mission, basically, and it continues to be so today. Organizations have subtly shifted their conservation focus. We continue to be on species wild locations across the world. Our history goes back to 1895. We were originally created under the title of the New York Zoological Society, and we opened as our headquarters in the Bronx Zoo, where we continue to have today. The organization is sort of split into one actually runs the zoos and aquariums in New York, the Bronx Zoo, the Central Park Zoo, the Queen Zoo, the Prospect Park Zoo, and the New York Aquarium. But even from the very beginning, our mission was about saving wildlife. In fact, Teddy Roosevelt created the New York Zoological Society partly in order to have an organization that could help save bison. In fact, that was really our first conservation success that we're still working on. Our first international field research was working on Dall sheep in the Alaskan area, which at the time was not an American state. But we've done a lot of international field research dating back to BB's work across Asia on pheasants. And for many of you who know George Schaller, who got to perform most of the really exciting work on most of the really exciting goals over the last 50 years, including mountain gorillas, the research that led to Diane Foss's work, as well as tigers, lions, snow leopards, giant pandas, and so on. We've done a lot of exploration work. This is just a shot of William Beebe again, dove in a bathysphere a half-mile down, world record at the time in 1904. We do a lot of work on conservation education, obviously through our zoos, but also through our programs in the field. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And because we have this affiliation with the zoos, we also have was the first ever in 1989 wildlife veterinary program, international scale, looking at everything from Ebola to canine distemper, influenza, so working hand in hand with our people. We have been very much involved in protected areas, both design, creation, and management, established about 250 parks, protected areas around the world so far. And our global program, which is the other side of the institution, the zoo side, now has about 2,000 staff and about 6 countries. So obviously the work that we do is a lot more than just protected areas. Protected area management is a very complicated field. Work in conflicts, human dimensions, connectivity, restoration, resource use, enforcement. I'll list the topics better than I can at this stage. But one of the advantages we have is that because we work in so many sites with so many people, we have the ability to share knowledge from site to site. Really valuable from a perspective. And just to touch very quickly, our mission, as I mentioned, conserving wildlife and wild places, the mission elements, saving globally important landscapes, saving globally important species, connecting people to wild nature. And we work on a series of global challenges, just some of them: sustainable development and human livelihoods, climate change, health, as I've mentioned, natural resource use and exploitation. And we really consider ourselves one of the best science conservation organizations, about 150 international. So I want to talk particularly about Asia, a map of Asia and some of the major landscapes where WCS works. And not surprisingly, as I'm sure most of you imagine Asia, a lot of the focus is down here in the tropics. But I want to talk about the rest of Asia. 84% of Asia is not in the tropics. And that many of you probably don't spend a lot of time thinking about, and perhaps you don't even know how many countries you could name without having and we're talking about a really big area, and not just a really big area, but vast landscapes. So the Eastern Steppe, which is just a small portion of Mongolia, 250,000 square kilometers. It's more than twice the size of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, and it's 10 times the size of the Serengeti Mountain. And it's not just that. A single individual Mongolian gazelle has been seen to use, within a year, about 25,000 square kilometers, which again is the same size as Sydney. So we're talking about huge, vast landscapes, surprisingly low human populations, and a real importance regarding connectivity in a habitat, an ecosystem that is cold, where animals need to be around to forage to avoid inclement weather. And to give you an idea about low human populations, so this is a map that we helped put together in 2008 showing snow leopard range. And what's interesting about it, it comes about 2.8 billion square kilometers. And if it were its own country, it would be the 6th most dense country on the planet. So there's not a huge amount of people across most of what I call temperate Asia. But there's a lot of threats, and those threats are growing rapidly. So I'm going to walk you through many of our programs and projects across this region. And I thought I'd just sort of start pretty north, where WCS began our Arctic Beringia program about 8 years ago. And the Arctic Beringia program includes Arctic Alaska, Arctic Siberia, and the oceans in between. It's an incredibly high productivity area with amazing abundance. This is a shot of caribou, coastline by Arctic. And it's facing some significant challenges, probably the greatest being climate change. This is a shot of walrus, Russian side. What's interesting about walrus is they historically have primarily bred on sea ice. But what's happened is the sea ice has receded so much in the spring that females aren't able to dive to the bottom anymore to find food. So they're now breeding on the coastline, which would be all fine and dandy. But if you imagine a motorcycle going by or dogs barking, you have a mass of tonnage going to the sea. Speed of loss, we've seen losses of about 90% mortality. Young. So what's happening? They're just crushed. So it's just an example of some of the issues that these species are facing, subtle changes in climate. Musk ox as well, with brown bears extending into the range and beginning to keep predators on them. Eiders, where you have an issue with their ability to successfully nest on barrier islands because of the massive storm on a regular basis. So a lot of very interesting and difficult problems, most of them, again, dealing with the fact that climate change is really changing the Arctic in so many different ways. And it's not just with wildlife management. You've got human livelihood issues. Obviously, with the sea ice receding, changes in shipping lanes, huge numbers of ships compared to what they used to be. The concomitant oil spill issues, extractive industries, the issues of just trying to find a way to develop conservation in an area that's shared between the United States, Russia, and in fact Canada. Stepping slightly to the south, we work in the Russian Far East, and we actually have since 1992. I like to describe it as New England with tigers. It looks just amazingly like Vermont or upstate. It's maple, oak, pine forests, just a whole suite of different species. And one of those species is Siberian tigers. We've been working on them since about 1992. Some of the best and longest research on tigers anywhere in the world, doing monitoring of tigers in prey and doing law enforcement as well in protected areas. The biggest issues that they face is poaching in Russia. We do a lot of other interesting work as well, model fire prevention, trying to come up with ways Russians themselves to keep fires from wiping out the forests across this region and turning it all into savanna. And human-tiger conflict, you're dealing with a very large predator. It's difficult for people to live around. So we have an active team, we've had it around 15 years now, that goes out when there are problem tigers. Historically, people just shoot a problem tiger. And we're now darting and relocating the animals, which is always an exciting experience. But it's been a very effective one in terms of making sure that these animals are not just simply removed from the population. We've also been more recently dealing with tiger reintroductions. A number of cubs were found poached, 6 of the other couple of years. And they were raised and trained to hunt and released in an area that hadn't seen tigers at that point. Almost all of them have been successful. One actually had to be captured and moved a lot, all the way down into China, back into Russia, but it ended up actually killing a lot of domestic dogs. So it had to be captured and turned into a zoo, returned to a zoo. But a number of tigers that have been released have been doing very, very successfully. And in fact, one of them, Pushka, which is Russian Cinderella, came across an itinerant male and got together and they have bred cubs. And that's a really exciting thing in terms of the area that really has not seen tigers. We've been very big on trying to nurture the next generation of conservation biologists. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1990. We'll talk about this more with some of the other countries, but it was a huge problem. The economy crashed, jobs were very, very scarce. Especially in the Far East is sort of the end of the road in Russia to begin with. So it was very hard to get people to get into the idea of conservation biology in Russia, especially in the Russian Far East. So by building the Sakota-Lin Research Center and providing a way for students to come to this area and do research there and meet international students and get training for the international community, we've really helped develop a much wider community for conservation biologists in the region. Many of whom have gone on to run some protected areas and do as I mentioned, we have a health program, and it turns out that it's a good thing we do because canine distemper has been found to be a huge problem for tigers. A number of tigers have caught it and died. When they catch it, they also move to people, move into villages, and problem tiger perspective. So we have been actively working on doing research trying to figure out where the carriers are for canine distemper, if it's just the domestic dog population, if it's these other creatures, such as red foxes and badgers, and what we can do. Tigers are not the only animal we work on in this program. We also work on far eastern or emerald leopards. That's 50 Maine, found in this far corner of Russia. A few of them have siphoned over to the Chinese border. I'll talk about that more in a minute. We work on Asiatic black bears and Eurasian brown bears. And we have a very interesting program on Blackesten's fish owls, which is the largest owl in the world. Very cool owl that also nests primarily only in old growth riparian forests, so it's very good flagship habitat. I mentioned leakage of leopards into China. It's not just leopards, but also tigers. Historically, both tigers and leopards were essentially wiped out on the Chinese side. But there are now enough tigers, about 150 in Russia, that they're starting to recolonize the Chinese side. We're seeing that more and more in the last few years. But one of the problems is that while there's not much in terms of poaching of tigers on the Chinese side, there's a huge amount of poaching of prey. It's going to be empty forests, and when tigers do move into China, there's not much for them. trying to find ways of dealing with both the loss of wild prey, tiger-human conflict issues with part of our program. So we do surveys, we do snare removals. Again, snaring is the big issue with poaching. Guns are not allowed in China. A lot of monitoring of tigers and leopards, and a lot of outreach regarding dealing with very large predators, trying to get them. We work on the other side of China as well, in Tibet, in the Changtang region. Here on the map, just look. Here's an image of our landscape with Germany nestled in there. So this is a big, big it starts about where the Rockies end, elevation. This valley is probably about 14,000 elevation. And what you're actually looking at is a gigantic herd of Tibetan. So it's considered the Asia Serengeti. Serengetis, but in this case, I think there's some validity to it. You have Tibetan antelope, Kiev wild ass, Tibetan gazelle. You also have Kowalski's gazelle there, Tibetan brown bear, snow leopard, wild yak, blue sheep, polo sheep, black-necked crane. Just a really amazing plethora of wildlife in an environment that, frankly, I've been there, doesn't. So our program has been working there actually since the 80s. Many of our programs do. It was started by George Zahler there and doing research into wildlife. Since grown to be a full-scale program with an office and government to find ways to protect some of this wildlife. We work over the border in Mongolia. I mentioned the eastern steppe before. That's that corner there. It's one of the last great temperate grasslands left on the planet. About 250,000 square kilometers just in the eastern steppe area alone. It's a place that they get in Boston. Also, I've driven for 3 days with that same human being. It's really a spectacular place. What you can see is a lot of Mongolian gazelles. They're still well over in the animals across the landscape. They're interesting because they have historically been described as migratory. Research has shown that they are not really migratory. They're not huge distances, following the green up primarily. And again, in terms of conserving them, it becomes very tricky because they're not moving in different patterns. You're not protecting particular areas. You really have to protect the landscape as a whole. And that's a tricky business. The eastern steppe also has up to 6 species of cranes, almost half the species of cranes in the world that are eating there. But it's facing a lot of threats as well. Probably the biggest was, again, the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1990. The economy went from a centralized controlled system that provided jobs to a market one, where it was free, but there was essentially no market. So the economy completely collapsed. And meanwhile, the border with China opened. And everybody started selling everything to Chinese, just to supply. And that included, unfortunately, most of the economic viable species. So within about a 20-year period, you saw declines of 50% species. Really fast declines, just due to massive culture. So we've been doing a lot of work trying to figure out ways of controlling that, which include multi-agency task forces. One of the problems in Mongolia is you have a lot of agencies with different mandates. Some work in protected areas, outside of protected areas. Some can't make arrests, some can't confiscate guns. So we've built these teams consisting of all the different agencies that are involved in a prosecution, arrest prosecution, and having them go out and do patrols and to sort of crack down on poaching, anti-trafficking. And of course, we're also working with local people. About a third of the population is still out on the steppe, still raising animals in gairs and tents, and trying to work with that local population to develop ways that they can better manage their wildlife and lands themselves. We work on Saiga antelope. This is an animal that, again, historically, millions across Central Asia, primarily in Kazakhstan, but again, it's a situation where population crash after the Soviet Union collapsed. They lost 97% of the population in 20 years. Ends down to 40,000 animals. They had a rebound. They sort of went essentially economically extinct. Longer viable to about hunt them into great numbers. So they actually increased to about 300,000 half ago. And last spring, the spring before last, they had a massive die-off, 200. There's a smaller subpopulation living in Mongolia that we've been working with since about 2000. Again, the poaching has been because of the male swarms, which are very important in traditional medicines in China. We do a lot of work now with extractive industries. Mongolia has somewhat recovered economically in the last 2 years, and that is being driven by extractive industry markets and mining, gas. And it's creating some very interesting problems for wildlife in the region. So we work in the South Gobi with the Reintroduction, which was the world's largest copper mine, doing core biodiversity monitoring for what is called net positive impact, trying to hold the mine to its guarantee of having positive impact. See how it goes. It's a very interesting experiment kind of working with industry, primarily working in terms of the key species Hulan for genetic mass and later developed species of interest, such as the lovely large eared Tropilunch shown there. That led to actually my helping to co-author the CMS guidelines on linear infrastructure for Central Asia. Probably one of the biggest problems, immediate problems, fences, railroads, roads, obstructing these large animals, ability to move back and forth to find weather. I'm going to hop a little bit to the west and talk about Iran and the last few Asiatic cheetahs. They used to exist from the Middle East up in Kazakhstan and down to India, and they are now only found in the Dashti Kabir Central Desert region of 50 to 100 remaining. And rather than try to explain why, I'll just show this map, which is 1,000 birds perhaps, and outlined around this region. As you can tell, sort of the only region left that's habitat available for cheetahs. Our focus began in the late 90s, early 2000s, just on trying to find out how many animals there might be doing camera trap work with cheetahs in Iran. And we've also been building research and capacity for the government department environment in Iran, so they can better manage not just the cheetahs, but the associated wildlife region. I'm going to talk a little bit about now the greater Pamirs Transboundary landscape. I could go on for hours, a little while about this region. This is actually a map that was created by the governments of China, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Tajikistan in 2006 at a workshop we put on about a transboundary protected area. Unfortunately, it didn't progress, and political events occurred from there. It didn't allow this to become reality. But at the same time, we've used that workshop and the definition of this landscape to help drive a lot of the conservation that's happened since then. So there's a lot of really interesting species. The snow leopard is kind of the linchpin and flagship of the region. This is a camera trap photo from Afghanistan. There's also Marco Polo sheep, the largest sheep in the world. That's actually a spread of approximately 6 feet to lie down and big, big animals. The Himalayan ibex, lovely big cliff dweller. The blue sheep or varal, primarily found on the Chinese side. Markhor with these big, huge scoop horns, very much like kudu if you're in Africa. And the urio, which is a smaller relative sheep, found in the oceans. So this is my bona fide shot. One of those people is talking to you right now. You can tell from the yellow shoes which one it is. I started work in Pakistan in the early 90s. I went off to study an animal called the woolly flying squirrel, which is the largest flying squirrel in the world, about 4 feet. no risk to tail, but was also last seen in 1924, thought to be extinct, really only known from a few study scans collected in 19. I worked in sort of the central mountainous region of Pakistan. It's where the Himalayas, the Kush, the Karakorams, Pamirs, they all come together in this big crash where India ran into Asia a long time ago. And it's sort of understandable why these squirrels were sort of actually a landscape. And it turns out it's worse than that because the squirrels nest with caves. So the only way to get there is to either climb up or tunnel down to reach those caves. But find them we did, track them we did, found all kinds of interesting things, including that they were eating primarily pine, which is very weird. There are a few species of mammals that do specialize in pine needles, some wood rats, some juniper, Zahler, which is a small Western America that specializes in pine needles. But it's a very unusual food source. But obviously, if you figure out a way to eat them, you have a super abundant food source, and it explains why it was able to trap them. But what else I found is, of course, if they were eating pine needles, they were eating pine trees, and those were disappearing incredibly fast. There was a huge amount of deforestation occurring, driven by what's called the timber mafia, companies from the south that were coming in, just buying rights to the forest and clear cutting it rapidly. So rather than sort of document the extinction of pine squirrels, started to kill the cities in Pakistan, which was really a community-based program. Spent a lot of time crouching in potato fields, talking to elders, building up an interest in and a belief that these people could just sort of take over control of managing their forests and wildlife. We ended up building 65 new governance institutions in the area, 65 different communities, each with their own organization, now registered with the government, mandated with managing forests and wildlife. We started working with the government, their own capacity to manage wildlife and bringing them together, the communities and the government. A lot of our focus was on markhor. And one of the reasons for that is it turns out that markhor are worth about $50,000 to $100,000 for individual trophy male, which is a lot. And only 4 trophies are allowed each year, only 4 permits are allowed each year. Results in a trophy. And 80% is mandated by law to be returned to the. So in fact, that's been an incredible incentive in Pakistan, this area. We've seen a 70% increase in populations. As a matter of fact, markhor were a year and a half ago downlisted. It was unprecedented 2 steps from endangered past threatened. And the work that we do now incorporates about 65 communities, about 400,000 people across square kilometers. It's all community-based, no protected areas in there. And the forests that we were losing at a really rapid rate appear to be pretty much, the deforestation is under control. Our initial estimates suggest that we've lost less than a tenth of % of the forest in the last 15 years, which I actually find very hard to believe. Getting down to the staff and proving that, or disproving it, see. But it certainly suggests that. In 2006, I had an opportunity to try to scale that up to Afghanistan and see what would happen. I get asked this a lot, why do conservation in Afghanistan? It's a human calamity, there's conflict and warfare, why would you possibly save life? And one of the answers is that 80% of Afghans can natural resource-based. So if you're going to have sustainability, security, stability, and reconstruction, you have to focus on natural resource base. And that resource base has been very badly managed. This is a 25-year difference of Baghdad province in terms of forest cover. You can see that during that period of time, from the Soviet invasion onto the end of the initial major conflict, civil wars, they lost virtually. But there's another reason why conservation in Afghanistan is important. It's known, of course, as part of the Silk routes, trade routes between Europe and East Asia. But it's also at the biodiversity. It's not just snow leopards, it's also Persian leopards, it's lynx, it's caracal, it's wildcat, jungle cat, palace cat, jungle cat, wildcat, and sand cat, 9 species of felids, which is, in perspective, the same number of wildcats that we have in all the countries of Sub-Saharan put together. So it is, weirdly enough, a very biodiverse place. But it's not just wildlife, it's really unique landscapes, it's really unique cultures. There are a lot of reasons to try to do this type of work. So, for those of you who spent lots of time doing field work, you know, in a place like Afghanistan, you face the usual problems getting to your field site, around in your field site, getting back from your field site. But on top of that, there's some interesting issues regarding field work in Afghanistan. Landmines, ordinances, a poor and continuing to degrade security situation. So we actually, I won't go into the details. Again, it's probably, we have extremely strong security measures to date on wood, which we've had twisted basement, box. We have about 50 to 70 staff. So, and one of the interesting things about working in a place like Afghanistan, so essentially the government recreated itself in 2003. And that provided, to some extent, a blank slate. So we got to help draft 8 environmental regulations for the country. And we helped train staff what it meant to actually go ahead and implement those laws and regulations. We did some of the first wildlife surveys since the 1970s. This is the eastern forests of Afghanistan. We got to see species like marten, jackals, bears. We worked on snow leopards for a number of years, tracking them. Just data going there. A lot of our focus, much like in Pakistan, has been on community-based conservation. Again, the idea that the government in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Afghanistan really doesn't reach very far into the mountains, especially true in Afghanistan. Hardly reaches the city. So if there's going to be conservation occurring out in these areas where wildlife can still be found, it's going to have to be driven to just by these communities themselves. So we've helped create some institutions such as the Wakhan Pamirs Association, which now manages basic resource decisions across all Wakhan district. We have about 70 community-based rangers operating in Afghanistan now, including running our camera tracking program. And some of this has led to some really exciting changes in the country, which includes the creation of Pamirs National Park in 2009. This is a picture of a ribbon cutting ceremony with the Ambassador Ickenberry, the Vice President of Afghanistan, Governor, Prince of Afghanistan. Pamirs is a very strange place. It's about 10,000 feet in elevation, and it's a series of 6 lakes separated by natural trout, calcium carbonate. It percolates out of the water and creates these enormous dams for people. Talking about deep-foot natural dams. It's just very, very strange, very beautiful structure. It's all set in a canyon that's reminiscent of the Grand Canyon. A beautiful place. And in fact, in 2014, work then led to the second national park we created, Wakhan National Park. It's about 11,000 square kilometers. If you know Afghanistan, geographically, it kind of looks like this. This thumb is Wakhan. That entire area is now a national park, containing about 75% of snow habitat. Those are Marco Polo sheep. A lot of our work since then has been focused on national park management, but again, working communities primarily, but also the government as well. And weirdly enough, doing a lot with tourism. Wouldn't think of tourism opportunity. In fact, they get over 9,000 tourists to Beringia a month during the summer. It's a huge thing. About 300 high-end adventure tourists to walk on. It's still very hiking. So we do a lot of work on tourist plans. We did not bring in this one. Somebody else did. But they're cute. We do a lot of work with communities, not just on conservation per se, but improving livelihoods. So directively related to conservation, such as canals, and so can't get into them. Trail maintenance, dealing with fuel-efficient stoves. A lot of work on health initiatives as well, looking at especially the interface between livestock diseases, wild cattle diseases, sheep, such species. We've been working a lot on wildlife trade in Afghanistan too. Interestingly, a study we did early on suggested that one of the biggest drivers of wildlife trade in Afghanistan is the international community. And you can kind of imagine a lot of people come in, a lot of money, because it's Afghanistan, and after you buy your first 2 carpets, you buy. It's no longer that. So we started working immediately with the military, which is one of the big drivers of wildlife trade, in terms of training them not to do that anymore. And it was successful enough that we're actually now doing that same kind of work here in the States, training them in bases before they're actually deployed. When you reach them in a place like Afghanistan, go around for months, get continued training in bases, we have an opportunity to reach them before they're going out. And the military love it because, of course, like STDs, it's an issue of safety for the military personnel. You don't want to be caught with something that's illegal. Afghanistan is transferring it internationally, and it's illegal bringing it back into the US. So in a lot of ways, military personnel get in trouble, and so they really like the fact that trying to do this safety issue. For the future in this area, we're very interested in climate change. Obviously, it's an area that is currently being hugely hit. As changes are occurring in climate ecosystems of Central Asia as well. Just steps in future. Water security, a big issue related to climate change. A lot of the major rivers that are feeding hundreds of millions of people, this river and the Dairy River and so forth, to try and figure out ways to provide better water security to protect wildlife resources as well. Some of the work we're doing now in Afghanistan on watershed catchment protection, tree plantings, areas that are basically deforested, getting back up and to look more natural and control erosion, stymie flooding and issues. And we're very interested in conflict resolution in resource management. It's the work that we've sort of fallen into, especially in countries where it's an issue, not just regionally, but also community to community. So the work that we're doing, I think, is really creating a platform for these communities to talk with one another. It's creating a platform for them to actually reach out to the governments, these tribal areas, and then to bring them all together in a way opportunities for conservation. So I'll leave you with this last quote from George Zahler in his book, T7 Stones of Silence, which we're working out there. And I just want to have a question. I'll open it up for questions.